welcome back. In this video, I would like us to consider several issues relating to the organisation Women's Aid, and in particular, an associated organisation called Refuge, which, as its name suggests, is an organisation that is primarily involved in providing shelter and assistance to women who have suffered domestic violence or abuse. Before we begin this particular adventure together, I need to make it plain that I'm not opposed in principle to such organisations. My intent here is to highlight where I see as serious flaws in the system. This might be mistaken by some for indifference or even a callous disregard for suffering. But let me make one thing absolutely clear. Lighting candles will not save a single life. Nor do I have any insight or profound words of wisdom relating to the nature of the crimes we will confront in this video. The topic invokes a visceral response, and therein lie a very real danger, in that it can be exploited by the unprincipled for their own ends. This is a subject we could easily sidestep, but after doing the research for the feminist criminology videos, it became obvious to me that this particular subject was one we just can't avoid. If you want fluff and nonsense, I recommend subscribing to Dr. Christy Winters. Having said that, I hope you will stay with me and let's meet this issue head on. Women's Aid are a distinctly partisan organisation. They subscribe unapologetically to feminist dogma. Women's Aid are actually an umbrella organisation. You might consider it as a federation of smaller, like-minded groups, one of which is Refuge, which recently received £10 million grant from the United Kingdom government. When we view the annual accounts for the organisation, we see that its highest paid executives enjoy a combined remuneration of over £500,000. Senior positions within the organisation can command salaries in the region of £70,000 to £80,000 and chief executives well over £100,000. So we have a potential conflict of interest because not only are the organisations ideologically driven, but there are also considerable financial incentives involved as well. Women's Aid have been working closely for some time with the Home Office on proposals to extend the law to cover areas of domestic abuse not previously covered by law. References to so-called reports produced by Women's Aid can be found peppering government reports and documents. For instance, when we read the briefing document on domestic abuse produced by the Police Federation, we find 7 references to Women's Aid reports and statistics, while there are only 3 references to statistics produced by the Office of National Statistics. This should give any careful reader pause for consideration, if for no other reason than Women's Aid is an advocacy group, not a research body. I want to emphasise here the trust and reliance by our politicians and public bodies on the reports and statistics produced by Women's Aid. These reports are used in public consultation documents, police briefing reports, and if we view Hansard, we see that they've been used in parliamentary debate to justify changes in legislation. The report used in a recent House of Commons debate was produced by Women's Aid and titled Child First, 19 Child Homicides. This report can only be described as a fabrication. It is a completely dishonest document. The report trawled 10 years of serious case reviews. These reviews are often undertaken by authorities in the event of a child homicide. Having trawled through these reviews, the authors carefully selected a dozen cases of men killing their children whilst on contact visits. These carefully selected cases are used in 19 child homicides to justify calls for further restrictions on fathers being granted contact with their children. The report itself can be described as a campaign document. The campaign which it was designed to support is the Child First campaign run by Women's Aid itself. A more accurate title, though, might be Women's Aid First, because child welfare is simply used as a vehicle, and Women's Aid is not shy in pushing every emotional button available to them, and push them they do, ruthlessly. Polly Neat, CEO of Women's Aid, in the foreword to 19 Child Homicides, writes, and I quote, "Whatever the stated requirements on the family courts, there is a deeply embedded culture that pushes for contact with fathers at all costs." And later in the report we read, and I quote, "The pro-contact approach taken by the family justice system has seemingly overtaken the need for any contact orders to put the child's best interests first." So the report itself consists of a number of cases of child homicide committed by the father while on a contact visit. But there is something striking about the cases reviewed, and I suspect you've already guessed what it is. After sifting through 10 years of serious case reviews, it is only men, it seems, that murder their children while on contact visits. Now, you might label me as being a cynic, but I find that extremely unlikely. It's an absurd finding. Was there not a single case of a mother killing her children in this entire 10-year period? In relation to the selection criteria used by the authors, the report has this to say, and I quote, "In this study, Women's Aid aims to identify those cases where a child has been killed by a perpetrator of domestic abuse in circumstances relating to a child contact, formally or informally arranged. The selection of cases was done on the following criteria. A child has been killed. 2. The perpetrator was the child's parent and had perpetrated domestic abuse against the other parent. 3. The parents were separated and child contact had been arranged informally or formally." The report continues, "After applying these criteria, 12 reports were found to be relevant. We did not apply any exclusion criteria regarding the gender of the perpetrator of domestic abuse. However, in all of the relevant cases, it was the father who was the perpetrator. This is disingenuous. It's bordering on mendacity. The impression is given that only fathers were perpetrators of abuse, and only fathers were responsible for killing a child whilst on contact visits. But notice the filter on case selection provided by Criterion 2. The perpetrator had perpetrated domestic abuse against the other parent. Given the strategies in place and the operating procedures employed by child protection services, it is unlikely that fathers were ever asked if they'd been subject to domestic abuse by the mothers. The reverse is, of course, standard practice. Consequently, Filter 2 acts as a virtual guarantee that only fathers will be selected. The report authors would have been aware of this, would be an effective filter for selecting fathers while excluding mothers from any consideration. We will have to look at the unfiltered data to understand just how misleading this report actually is. Now, the statistics that I will reference have been meticulously compiled by William Collins, and a link to his research can be found in the description box, along with another independent academic study and links to a 2000 report by the NSPCC, both of which align with his findings. In the 7 years, 2009 to 2015, there were 332 children culpably killed in the UK whose deaths have been subject to serious case review by the child protection authorities. Let's review the numbers between these years, and when we tabulate the data, it looks like this. Do you notice anything surprising when comparing the numbers of homicides committed by fathers and the number of homicides committed by mothers? When we look at the actual data, it paints an entirely different picture to that presented by feminist ideologues. If we look at the total number of homicides during the period 2009-2015, we see a total of 85 homicides committed by mothers and 55 committed by fathers. If we were to convert these numbers to percentages, mothers are culpable for 60% of child deaths. But, I hear you say, all very well, but the 19 child homicides report was focused on murders committed while on contact, and that is a good point. So do you think it might be possible that at least some mothers had murdered their children while on contact visits during the period covered by the report? Sadly, yes. But it took a lot of effort by William Collins to collate the cases that would fall into that category. We have April 2015, Lancashire, Child N, August 2014, Oxfordshire, Child N, March 2015, Coventry, Child T, and November 2014, Sunderland, Baby A and Child C. We also have what is called spite killing, where the mother murders a child despite the father, such as the Samira Lipidou case, which we shall look at later for reasons that will become obvious. We also have cases of mothers killing their children after having the father removed from the home by making criminal accusation of domestic violence or abuse, such as November 2014, Torbay, C42, April 2014, Devon, CN08, November 2013, Bradford, Hamza Khan, October 2014, Bedford, child A1301. It's a depressing litany. So we do have cases of child homicide while the mother was on contact that occurred during the period the report claims to cover. And this is why in the introduction I've made the claim that the report is a fabrication, a half-truth. And as we all know, a half-truth is a full lie. What a cynical, pernicious and unscrupulous piece of work it is. But there is even worse to come. One case in particular stands out, and when I show you the headline, you'll recognise why immediately. It is the case of a mother murdering her two daughters, the Samira Lupidi case. The first thing you should note is the reference to intergenerational violence within the headline. But the most shocking aspect was that this murder had been committed in a Refuge safe house, and it was committed months before the publication of 19 child homicides. The mother and her daughters ended up in the Refuge after she had called the police to her home, accusing her partner of domestic violence. She had told the police that she was afraid that the partner was going to kill her. Unfortunately, this was the opposite to reality. It was the mother who was known to be extremely violent. The next morning, while still resident in the Refuge, she stabbed both children to death. Each received 9 stab wounds to their chests as they lay in bed. In conclusion, I want to re-emphasise some important points. These points I have made in several videos, and I make no apology for repeating them here. Firstly, domestic violence is an intergenerational issue and not, as proposed by feminist theory, a gendered issue. If we continue with this nonsense, many more children will lose their lives. Second, feminist theories are unsubstantiated. They should never become the basis of public policy, or even taken seriously. And this leads me to my final point, and that is, current strategies for handling reported domestic abuse are not simply flawed, but unjust and dangerous. Mothers are more likely to be responsible for a child death than fathers and male partners combined. Single mothers are the demographic most likely to be responsible for the deaths of children, while there are no cases of single fathers killing their children in their care, to be found in the 300 serious case reviews considered in the research. When we visit the Women's Aid website and land on the Child First page, we see an exemplary display of virtue signalling. We are encouraged to light a candle for Clair, and patrons have dutifully obliged with carefully arranged lighted candles. But what we're not encouraged to do is to light a candle for the other victims, the ones whose deaths don't suit the narrative. No candles will be lit in memory of Jasmine or 3-year-old Evelyn. We end our adventure at this point. I hope you found something of interest in this video. If you would like to support my channel, I now have a Patreon page. If you're unable to support my work through Patreon, then you can share, like, or comment. It's all good. Thank you for watching.